The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon and welcome everybody, or some of you might be still the morning hours here in the Pacific time zone that I'm currently reside in. So welcome everybody. This is one of several of our Prospero educational webinars. We hold several each month. I'm going to spend just a couple moments inside PowerPoint, but the bulk of the time I'll be looking inside the application, providing you education and tips and tricks to make your budgeting reporting life easy. My name is Derek Krebs. I'm a senior consultant with the MSX group, and I've been doing this for the last 25 years, devoted to consulting. Of those 25 years, the first 15 of years, we and most of the staff at MSX group worked at FRX and Microsoft. And we had such great reporting and budgeting products that Microsoft acquired us, where we internally worked. We still will support those flagship products for years to come, but most have transitioned to Prospero. So I see a nice audience today of a mixed bag, meaning existing Prospero customers. And additionally, we have some of our Microsoft support customers still using FRX Manager Reporter and Forecaster on the call today, including some partners who are looking maybe to sell and deploy Prospero. So welcome one and all. And I also like to emphasize again, in the consulting world, I'm helping people in the trenches, so I'm going to show you some nice product ability to leverage and take advantage of. And oftentimes, too, for those new users on the phone call, I'll talk about Prospero's differentiators, how we stand apart from the rest, maybe the old Microsoft stack or some of our competing products that I think we do far superior than others. And maybe 2 or 3 more minutes inside PowerPoint, then I'm going to jump right inside the application. Today's session is focusing on the budgeting capabilities inside Prospero, including some of our detail screens of human resources and capital. So we'll look at some of the input of those elements of the budget side, including some back-end setup, which we're always transparent to show you really how easy it is to create some of these items here, including there's also import and export ability to efficiently get some of our end goals, like loading all of our existing staff to start our budgeting process. And then additionally, after we review some of our budget input, we'll definitely spend a little bit of time on the reporting side, how I can review seamlessly some of our actual versus budget data. And for those new to Prospero, I'll just talk about a couple moments of their ability within the application to do obviously reporting and budgeting, which historically, let's say in the Microsoft era, was 2 separate programs and processes. Like in your left hand was the reporting either using FRX or later Manager Reporter, or secondly on your right hand, the budgeting side with Microsoft Forecaster. So 10 years ago, as we got spun off from Microsoft, one of our company charters was combine those 2 products into one seamless, cohesive application. So we are avoiding double the work that maybe some of you still in that Microsoft stack are doing. And I'll shed a little bit more light on that. A couple bullet points might be, hey, you might be still manually importing and exporting actual and budget data. You might be having to maintain different line sets, trees, security in 2 applications. Or in Microsoft Forecast, you had to manually add new segments, accounts, periods, etc. Now, all of those manual steps we've improved within Prospero. So sit back, relax, and I'm going to now provide you some further information behind that. This slide, my paraphrase, is on the reporting side, some nice little capabilities to do graphing and dashboarding, including report collections where I can run multiple reports at once, drill down to account and transaction level, including changing the drill order of reports on the fly without having to go to a second, third, or fourth report. Prospero thankfully uses the industry standard, at least in our world and eyes, row, column, and tree to create and design reports because they were so accountant friendly and so flexible. Because when I compare this against Excel add-in products, I despise those due to me getting back in the Excel world, and I'll have no visibility and shared nature of, let's say in blue, that 1 row format income statement. In Prospero, yeah, we can use that in 10, 20 different reports and budget screens as we wish. But in the Excel world, I have to go to 20 different Excel files to maybe do edit review of such. So my favorite, many of several features I love of Prospero that stands us apart from the rest. Now on the budgeting side, even though today is going to be focused primarily on HR and capital, I'll definitely shed a little light on additional capabilities where in summary, for especially the new people to Prospero, it'll have a spreadsheet look and feel to it, but it's what we call Excel on steroids, meaning it's not Excel, but it leverages the SQL database backend, which encompasses several things for us: secure real-time data. Additionally, it will do automatic aggregations like the tree called all, you'll hear me quote, the all tree automatically created and maintained. So as you add location departments, we do not have to set up and maintain those. We have also the bells and whistles in our budgeting, including down to line item detail, capital HR, revenue details, audit trail history, allocations, adjustments, etc., to just name a few of the elements here. Now, before I exit this one slide, I would like you to maybe jot my email down. We will definitely reserve the last 10 or so minutes of today's session for any question and answer. If you do have questions along the way, I'll have you take advantage of the questions area within the GoToWebinar control panel. Otherwise, all of you are on mute only to keep background noise in a minimum here. Now, as you found out about this webinar, let me call your attention to some upcoming free educational opportunities. So briefly, our website is msxgroup.com. Looking at our links here under the upcoming events, you probably saw today's session via our webinar link, like that on Prospero, but we still do several on the legacy Microsoft stack, including even FRX instances for it. And then additionally, twice a year, we have our user forum, free, virtual, and those are 2 days in length that we hold twice a year. So 4 full days of free product training, which are also CB credit eligible. And on those user forums, we have 1 day devoted to the Microsoft legacy stack and 1 day devoted to Prospero. So thank you for joining us today. And we will also be recording these sessions that you can later share out for your other coworkers. And they'll be found within these same links I'm pointing to right now on our website. All right, thank you for letting me do some little house cleaning items, and I'm now going to jump right into the application focused on budgeting. And currently I have 3 Prospero sessions available to us of maybe different people in your organization. One might be a CFO, seeing more of a condensed view. Maybe they do not do budget input, they maybe just do budget review. Or secondly, I might have an end user. Yes, more hands-on, that looking at more granular individual location or down to some of the details, including entering budget data. And maybe third role or persona might be the accountant, like power user of Prospero. I'll show you definitely some items behind the scenes. I'm going to start with the end user perspective. Whenever you launch Prospero, you'll take us to this nice, easy landing page, what we call our quick launch, where we have favorites like here on the left for reports and charts, or secondly for budget input screens. This example might be for my end users. I give them or allow them visibility to 2 reports, like this top one might be being an actual versus budget report, or the bottom one, how about a rolling 12-month trend including this year, last year. Whenever I click one of these shortcuts, it will pull up the last published report. And I just want to call your attention to, if you wanted to archive old reports or group them in any way possible, here is our published report area and different folders that you can scheme up in any ways. Right now, it's currently demonstrated as date-driven folders, but it could be group-driven, like here's my board of director report or manager report, or even can be report-driven, like balance sheet reports, income statements, you name it. Now, let me even start by opening up the report of actual versus budget. And this is what I'm going to call historical looking, meaning you, the accountant, has already closed the book. I'm now looking at this actual versus budget report. And how about you've asked all the managers, which I currently right now am a manager, to explain variances to you. So you see a nice little visual cue here of the salaries account that has this blue icon indicator. I can hover on top of it to see the note for this account. Additionally, I can call out this window to the right that sometimes I minimize based on my real estate room I want to occupy or not. I'm now thumbtacking that annotations or notes panel to the right because I have a nice time date stamp as I'm logged in as a generic Manager 1 user of when that note was added and when. So that way you or others reviewing my financial report, you can see nice explanations to your financials. Or in other words, no, I don't have to pick up the phone or hunt down emails or other separate documentations. These are all going to be stored with the report and maybe location or division that I'm on. These are also interactive in several different ways. One would be maybe my boss or you might be adding additional notes saying, yep, Derek and I reviewed this department and here's our course of action. Or another bullet point might be graphing the report data, drilling down, or changing the drill order. And I'll get to some of those other notes later, even including exporting this to Excel to do some other ad hoc sharing or analysis of such data. Okay, most of what I just described was on some of our reporting sessions, but I wanted at least bullet point some of those nice abilities within the application. But how about let's now role play that it's that time of year where you want me, the manager, to update this budget. And then back in my original quick launch, I was looking at a historical report of actual versus budget, explaining my variances, but now I'm going to open up my budget screen. And when I do so, I even did a session earlier today talking about security, and I'll shed a little bit of light on that, but thankfully, super user friendly and easy, because two key concepts would be security assignments, meaning what location or departments I have access to, and secondly, visibility, meaning I might have two budgets we're working on, best case, worst case. How about my managers are all working on the best case? I'll go behind the scenes to show you some of those setup elements later, but for right now, in our demonstration company environment, I want to acquaint you with we are multi-company, even though this user, for their assignments, what data they have access to, has only access to the US company. Or similarly here in the background, even though we have multiple locations, this user only had the Denver location. And finally, their user assignments for the department, they actually have access to multiple departments, either through a list view I'm currently broadcasting, or here in the lower left, I can click on and maybe see it in a graphical tree view. And one of many new features inside Prospero is there's a tree called All, which automatically gets created and automatically gets maintained. Huge win in efficiency over some of the Microsoft legacy stack that I'll base most of my comparisons against. Now, if I add any new location departments, same story. It will automatically be included. It will automatically be aggregated, meaning I'm avoiding Excel hell in the budgeting, because I see some of the people in this phone call are existing Prospero customers that might only have the reporting aspect of it, but most, I'd say, also leverage the budgeting to, again, tie those two cohesive processes together and avoid double the work and maintenance. Now, I do already have this budget screen open for administration. And one little high-level thing on the budget side is the line set being used. I'm going to call this Department A with the suffix 100, but I'm going to come up here and the button Reopen Input I just clicked, and now I'm going to open up Department B. Now, many times these departments have the same look and feel, or shall I say the same line set, and that's great. That way, if I had 100 different departments, I just might have one line set they all share and use. Usually, one size or line set might fit all, but I'm going to show you a third example after this second department opens up, like here to the left in yellow, Department 100, or here to the right, I can multitask, and I'm now in Department 300. They had the exact same look and feel as I toggle back and forth, but how about third and finally, I'm going to click on the Reopen Input button, and I'm going to open up a third department that has a different line set, even where I'm budgeting to levels that are not my general ledger. Now, you see in our general ledger, like company location department, those are my non-account segments. In the background, usually my line set, I have my revenue expenses, or including balance sheet. When I get to capital, I'll also talk about capital new purchases that I'm budgeting for, but also this could flow into a balance sheet or cash flow. Now, as I open up this third department, I want to emphasize that primarily I'm going to budget on items that are in my general ledger, like location, department, and account. Now, what you're going to see here in yellow once this renders are additional levels of detail that I could budget to and also record actuals to. Two examples to that would be products. They're not segments in my general ledger. And secondly, employees. Product 10, motors. Product 20, compressors. Yes, I can definitely budget to, and here to the right, record actuals to, because Prospero has one SQL database in the back end, what we call our data warehouse. That includes GL, actuals, includes maybe this budget I'm real-time writing data to, including non-GL, actual, and budget. I just mentioned products like motors, compressors, etc. It could be statistics like units sold, sales price, headcount, you name it. All right, and then for color coding, any choice available to you. I like to have gray shade being indicator of lines you stay away from. However, rose and white, you enter data to. I'm going to go back to one of my original budget screens as my little sandbox here. I'm going to minimize these annotations, but how about let me just show you one other thing regarding notes or annotations. This was the original report I led in with, where maybe I'm explaining a variance, and then we saw that time date stamp here to the right for that user, etc. That is a historical looking note explaining maybe my variances, but in contrast, as I return back to the budget input screen where I'm entering data, I can, on the toolbar, this button here called Show the Annotations column. I have then here to the right where I can see those memos and notes, so at a quick glance, I can see what user and when, a time date stamp, added that memo for their budget. So perhaps I'm now reviewing your budget you just submitted or saved. I can now see that all real time. I don't have to manually collect Excel hell and group that all together. And through those automatic trees, they're rolled up as I'll segue back to the report later. Now, a couple other little bells and whistles that not really the full scope of today's session on the budget, but I'll at least shed light on. Here might be in green, line item detail, because maybe in marketing, we have this one account, $73.50 for advertising. I'm simply expanding it, and then maybe budgeting at additional detail levels or line items that on my toolbar, I can come up here and add or insert additional line items. Or secondly, we have nice little audit trail history, like this $8,000. I'm just going to change it and save it to a different value. We have very nice audit trail history where I can see who changed the account and when. And once that saves, I'll call your attention to the icon on the toolbar called History. I'll simply click it, and then I can see again, time, date, stamp, what user, when, and who added the memo or note. Now, excuse a couple of delays. I'm actually here in California. We have a couple of our sandbox server outs on the East Coast here. And then additionally, GoToWebinar has some also slight little delays here. And then the grand finale to that would be the good old history button. I'll go ahead and click then for. And then additionally, I'm going to segue to the showstoppers, meaning the key concepts of HR and capital, but there's that history button. There's some time date stamps of what user added the memo or note and when. And then I did some earlier saves of some other demonstrations prior to today's session. But there is who and when added these memos or notes, etc., or audit trail history. Now, as I return back to this screen, my preference when I'm setting up this budget for you, the end user, was gray shade you stay away from. So one of the largest costs of most organizations is their staffing. On the Human Resources tab, well, one thing might be, based on security, you might not see this tab at all. Or if you do, it might be read only. Or third, maybe I both can see this tab and maybe edit it, and that's completely up to you. And maybe if time permits, I'll show you those security settings, but we have just a couple quick bullet points like I described, like can you see the HR tab, yay or nay? And if so, can you edit it? Same goes for the capital screen. Yay or nay on those. Now, what I'd like to call your attention to additionally are some nice additional details, like here are definitely my salary dollar, including bonus and overtime. So I can have my budget be very simple, or many organizations I've worked with over the past 25 years, hundreds and hundreds. Probably need to win the lottery or find another job, but I love this. Bring the easy button to your process. Now, additionally, let me segue to statistics that are not my GL. That little phrase again, possibilities are endless, and confident reply I like saying of the product, first and foremost, stability. And our experience with is there's not been a budget model nor a report that I'm not been able to produce in Prospero due to its power, ease, and flexibility. So those new people on the phone call that are not existing customers, we do have a nice free trial version of Prospero that please take advantage of, or we can do one-on-one demos after this. Continuing, some other fun and automation we have in the process would be some related benefits. Like here might be health insurance, life, and this is our payroll tax. Notice our payroll tax, it starts high in the year, and once people reach their limits, it tapers off. And one little horror story, since I know about 4 or 5 products, budgeting reporting products that compete against Prospero, they are ungodly in their setup. In any demonstration, have them show you behind the scenes like I'm about ready to do so. Prospero is super easy. They're complex. I'll just summarize it at that. Now, let me take you to the Human Resources tab. So how about, let's say within our MSX group company, we have 200 employees. Normally I, the budget administrator, along with maybe the HR person, I might be one and the same or 2 different ones, I would simply import in all this staff ahead of time. Let's call it again 200 employees. Does not matter what payroll system you're on. I simply need a column for their name, how much they make, what department, and I import it in. Now, since I just quoted that, I have 1 or 2 files here behind the scenes. Here might be an HR import file. Like here's maybe what location department they work at. In yellow, maybe their employee ID and name. And third, maybe how much they make. Now, also within our MSX group, I reside in California. We have employees in about 10 different states. So when we load the people in, we might have a tag because Derek in California might be a different payroll tax rate for his state unemployment. Or for health insurance, I could keep it simple, where I'm budgeting everybody one flat rate, but nope. Most people maybe break it down in a couple different groups like single family or HMO, PPO, etc. And then these additional columns and names, you can completely control their heading and choices within, which I'll show you behind the scenes in just a second. But there's one little glimpse of how I can easily load the 200 people at MSX Group into this budgeting system. I'll circle back to that in just a moment, but there's my easy data dump out of my payroll system, maybe once a year, once a quarter, or even once a month that I might refresh and load. And then that's my starting point to my budget. And then if I provide my end users the ability, maybe they don't edit at all, they read only or not see that tab, but I can come up here, if I did have edit permission to insert, I could come up here and add a new hire. Okay. Now I'm not going to go through all those little motions. I'll just sort of paraphrase a couple of these for our condensed session today. Let's look at a couple of columns as I'm just going to go from the left to the right. Like the allocation field. This example is where we have both hourly and salary people, and I'll call your attention to these little radial buttons here at the very top, where I can show people here everybody hourly based or everybody full-time equivalency based as you see these highlighted cells change, or back to the original mixed, meaning hourly and salary. I then have 2 columns of when they start and end. We call that budgeting annually, or even I could break it out by month. So I might have even varying hours by month, because if I have any seasonality like summer months or winter months, if I'm in retail, I could break that out by month for varying hours or FTE during. We have various pay rates and increases, because how about this person starts making $25,000, but I'm going to budget a 10% increase maybe in period 3. I could ahead of time in my import file, I could have loaded a pay increase percent into the file and a pay increase period easily into the system. Because how about for cost of living, our organization wants to give everybody a 2.5% raise and let's say period 7 randomly. So I could load that ahead of time. Or maybe after the fact, based on maybe good performers or bad performers, I could do it more granularly or even at the position level, what we call pay grade. Now these pay grades, I'll elaborate on just a minute, but my interpretation of that, at least through the eyes of Prospero, is what expense account are we hitting for that? Either it might be one single expense account for salaries, which a lot of times organizations have, but a lot of times healthcare has several salary accounts where I might have a different salary account for nurses versus doctors versus nurse practitioners, etc. Okay, hold that thought on that term called pay grade. I'll get to it a little bit further, but I'm now back to my budget input screen looking at maybe a single department. And then additionally, I have this button here called HR Management for a quick little shout out to maybe I can see a snapshot of multiple people across the entire organization where here is maybe all employees in the system. If I double click, I can see how they're allocated out, meaning it might be more than one department. Even though this is a single department 100 this person's been allocated to, we definitely have that ability to split a person to more than one location or department, would be maybe my summary to this window, or HR master, seeing maybe employees across the different departments or locations I have access to is always my little footnote. And that's what we call assignments, like Bob Department A or Sally Department B. All right, I'm just going to close that HR management window. That's where, again, I can see a snapshot of all the different staff of the departments I have access to. And let me just close a couple of tabs here. As I was playing around, just showing you multiple different windows, I'm back to the original HR tab. Continuing left to the right, that was some pay raises with a side step. And then additionally, I can make this simplified or more granular as needed, meaning bonuses by $%. Now, if I key in any value over 100, the system's going to assume it being $1. So you have the ability $1 and or percent. So I'm just showing you two examples to that. I also can define what periods that gets paid out in. Otherwise, if that's left blank, it will automatically accrue it each month that they work in. And then finally, going back to those earlier examples quoted, like MSX Group, we have employees in numerous different states. So you, as the administrators, simply define what this pick list IDs and labels are. Like here's an example of employees in different states, therefore different state unemployment tax rates I'm going to budget for benefits. And finally, we have also, instead of one flat rate for health insurance, which might be one option, maybe I have multiple choices here. As many choices you want, like I do high deductible, low deductible, HMO, PPO, employee plus one, all that little lingo that maybe some of you are very familiar with, I'll shout out. And then additionally, I added some other columns here like workers' comp, level 1, 2, 3, like high risk, low risk, or cell phone, yes or no for some sales staff or management, etc. And then we're returning back to the main screen. Usually all that I just described, I don't have to worry about. It automatically gets loaded for me by maybe the HR administrator, the budget administrator. And then there is my rolled up dollars, including headcount, hours, and FTE. Not only budget, but since Prospero is a flexible data warehouse, there's maybe me recording actuals that I might not have in the general ledger, but we have easy importability of data, both budget and actual in the system. And let me turn our attention back to some of these benefits, like the payroll tax I'll call out again. And I'm now going to show you behind the scenes some of the setup, as that was sort of the front end of the HR side. All right, I'm going to go now to my budget administrator screen. And maybe before I do that, this was an earlier reporting session I did today, where maybe a CFO launches a report collection of multiple reports. So I'm going to call this our little dashboard of different reports and graphs. And they could further interact with some of those, like drill down, add financial footnotes, send it out to Excel. I'll just bullet point that. I'm now going to go to my administrator session, where behind the scenes, within this area called input versus maybe report, that's the two primary abilities within the application. I'm going to go to our budget input and looking at this primary budget. Now, first thought at the 10,000 foot level is we simply have a master line set used by all, because when I open up 3 departments, 2 of them shared the same look and feel, but then I opened up that third one that went down to the product level that had additional revenue, cost of goods sold. So on the overrides tab, here is where I could say, hey, for whatever company and location, it either could be a single department or location or multiple. Because how about here, looking at this location choice, maybe one line set or budget template, meaning what accounts, formulas, statistics they use, maybe they do not share the same thing, because maybe one part of my organization uses this sales line set, or maybe I have a law line set, or maybe some healthcare line set, or some of our other demonstration ability. But that's how I can define at a group level. Like here might be maybe just for the East Coast departments. And this is a tree where, again, I'm explicitly saying, hey, maybe all the locations are going to use this line set whenever they pull up Department 200. Or again, I can get granular at both the posting granular level or at the summary level. I can just define what template they utilize for budget. Let me close that out, but that sort of recaps maybe one of those thoughts from earlier. Now, additionally, let me correlate to this to Excel help. That is on the home ribbon. Looking at the catalog view, I can easily see in the entire system all the different reports, line sets, and templates out there. So here's a nice little list of maybe their name. Here's maybe what line set or column they're using. I'm going to click on this column heading. And even I can see who last modified it and when and so forth. Even we have a much detailed activity log that even takes this further of who made changes to what and when, but this is a summary of it. And then the last little key phrase is I see a few people new that are not existing Prospero customers. One thing I love about Prospero is its ease of setup and maintenance and our lovely and reusable rows, columns, and trees. Because here's all my report and budget templates. Maybe they share this one line set called income statement, versus in the Excel hell world, what I'd see here would be a bunch of Excel files like this. I would have no visibility of who last modified it and when, what they shared, because maybe these 3 items share the same line set. Who knows? I'm just guessing, but we want to avoid that Excel hell. So returning back to Prospero, there's our reusable line sets. And let me now segue to the Human Resources tab. I have a top half here that primarily defines what expense account we hit for our salaries. And we call that pay grade. That was that little term I called earlier. Now, secondly, the bottom half defines our benefits. Let me start even to the ladder. So I can easily come up here and zoom into my chart of accounts. So we have an automatic read from your general ledger, and we have interfaces with about 20 different ERP systems and versions. So here's a list. I'm zooming into my accounts. I can see all those. And in summary, these benefits could either be a percent of salary with a limit, like this top row for FICA, or without a limit, like our Medicare example. Or secondly, instead of a percent of salary with or without a limit, it could also be a fixed dollar per month. Like here's a few of our health insurance examples. Now over here to the right are some additional columns I can add. And I'm even going to come here in this little field called benefit filters. We currently have 3, but I'm just going to add a 4th one. It added this new column here to the right, and I'm just going to use an example I quoted earlier. How about I'm going to have cell phone? And maybe I could add a couple of choices, but maybe only need one choice, like those people that, yes, have a cell phone. I could then put a $% related to that. So how about cell phone is $200 per month? And then going full circle back, whatever information I know ahead of time, like cell phone, maybe these are my managers. I have yes to them. And then when I load in the system, that's how the system knows what state tax, what health, pension plan, choice A, B, and C, like 1%, 2%, 3%, etc. That's my HR import file. If I know information ahead of time, globally en masse, by all means, that's going to be the fastest way from point A to point B. But maybe after the fact, we saw on the budget input screen, maybe my managers maybe make some edits or confirmations of that if I'm unsure. Okay, let me cancel that out. that was me again, just coming up here. I'll just add a fifth item, a new column for any additional benefit, and then choices within. As I called that cell and clicked on the insert button for choice A, B, or C. Now finally, percent of salary with or without a limit as I recap, or dollar per month, and then finally we even could have an increment. So how about life insurance? How about that is $10 per 10,000 of salary? So if Sally makes $80,000, that might be a factor times 8 of that. Or if someone makes $250,000, so there's a very nice ability that sometimes benefits are also an increment of a person's salary, either with a limit or without. I could have defined yay or nay on that. Now behind the scenes, as I'm having flashbacks and horror stories of competing products, that's ungodly formulas I have to do. If ever you're seeing a demonstration of that and comparing it for these new users, have them show you behind the scenes because they probably won't. But here in Prospero, we're transparent, simple table, no formulas behind the scenes. One simple table that's going to control that. And I'm now going to go full circle back. Here's that income tax expense. My end users don't have to think or do. I just find that one simple assumption table, and there's no formulas behind the scenes in my line set nor column. Let me return back to the HR setup here of the administrator as I was talking about the bottom half. And let me just spend an extra moment on this top half as I paraphrase. Pay grades are simply, again, what expense account we're hitting for salaries. Well, I could get a little fancier, maybe different hourly and hourly, maybe different pay increases, but most customers only have one line in this grid at the top if they only expense one account. But by all means, I can get more granular and do some extra assumptions on my employees like overtime, pay increases, bonuses, yay or nay. But usually this list is pretty limited by that. And when I mentioned earlier, we had 2 columns. Let me go back and a reminder of that. Under human resources, we just had 2 columns of when they start and end. But I even can break that out by month. And then the only little check mark I need to turn on is this one right here, what is called doing it annually. If I turn that off, then it's going to show 12 columns of my 12 months. Otherwise, if that's turned on, I'll just have 2 columns of when they start and end. But if I have any seasonality, I'd turn it off, and then I'd be able to budget more granularly by each individual month, varying hours or FTE. Okay, as I wind down now in the HR little discussion, maybe one extra little side thought or two, and even new feature that came out a while back was really from some of our customer feedback. So one little side step before I'm going to show you a couple new features is under the home ribbon, 2 things. One would be a very good online help, and secondly, feedback and support. I'm going to click the latter, feedback and support. Well, you could pick up the phone the old-fashioned way and contact our support team, or you can send us an email, or better yet, if you click on this button, it could either be a product suggestion, like a new feature you'd like to see, and most do come from our customer feedback, so those existing customers, I'd like to remind you of that. Or secondly, it could be a product issue or error that you're getting, and both of these buttons to the right do the same thing, meaning it's going to immediately route to a large team on our support staff. Okay, and you just simply name your label, etc. And I think our fine print is we'll get back with you in 4 hours on that, but usually it's in minutes. But I think that's our fine print. But there's a nice little applaud and shout out to our great support and development teams that welcome and take all that customer feedback. That I'm reiterating a lot of the words I hear from our customers on that. Let me close that out. And let me secondly, under the home ribbon, show you this online help. Instead of clicking on that Prospero Help button, there's also a universal shortcut for that. I just hit the F1 button on my keyboard. And the advantage of the F1 button is it automatically knew what area I was in the product, meaning I was in my input for my budget screen. I was looking at this HR tab. So literally in seconds here, like I was talking about benefits and taxes, then I can click on this button, and then here might be some of the setup that Derek was describing, like step A, B, C, and some of the different fields like rates, limits, increments, etc. So this documentation, which live real time, meaning we're always updating it with new features, functionalities, and input. So there's another little plug for other ways you can arm yourself with additional information. Returning back to this screen on the human resources budgeting, we have this button, what's called the layout, which really, once I open it up, I'm logged in as the administrator. So therefore, when I go to the budget input screen, I'm going to see all of these fields. But for an example, what the compensation fields means or implies, and I'm going to return back to the budget input screen that might help me on that discussion. I'm going to come up here in the toolbar and I'm going to remove some of the windows that I see. So for an example, some of the compensation fields might be, maybe I don't want them seeing the salary dollar or increases. So if I turn that off, they would see something like this, meaning they wouldn't see the compensation fields at all. But maybe at the group level, more efficiently, I'm going to turn that back on, but there might be overtime fields, commission fields, benefit fields. So you can control what the users can or cannot see within this window, as I'm just demonstrating this user that has all access, turning them all on off. I'm going back to the administrator, meaning again behind the scenes, and I'd just like to recap. Here is the layout button where these are different roles or groups. Let me just take 1 minute to do a sidestep further on security. Prospero created by accountants for accountants, little or no IT involvement. So usually the budget administrators and accounting are doing all this. We do not need IT. We love them, but don't need them. And let me come now to the security button. I only have one area or click on the user area. And what you're seeing here are now different roles, because one of my examples for human resources was or are, can they see the HR input tab, yes or no? So here in the input role area versus the reporting ability, but in the input area, if they don't get to see the HR tab at all, I would simply turn that off at the group level. Or if they did get the HR tab, I could turn it on, but maybe I'm a control freak because any HR changes have to go centrally through me, the CFO or HR person. So maybe I mark that as read only on that tab. So there are maybe two key buttons I quoted earlier, but behind the scenes in our security, very easy to turn that on and off. And then finally, for my little 1 or 2 minute recap of security, we have what is called security assignments, like Bob in Department A or Sally in Department B. So I'm going to open up here as Bob, as we have generic users, but usually you'd have like Derek or the administrator, etc. All right, here's Bob, or let's call it beneath Sally. And then here I'm going to come up here and click assignments. The asterisk means they get access to all, in this case, companies. But I'm going to role play or play around with, nope, maybe company 1. Or how about for the location? How about Derek gets locations 400, 405, and 410, meaning all the locations that begin with a 4. Well, I could actually have 3 rows for those 3 locations I quoted, but better yet, instead of me choosing all of these locations with beginning with a 4 I just described, maybe that's all my Midwest departments. So instead, I'm going to click on this little tree. Here's our default tree, automatically created and automatically maintained out of the box. Great news. But I'm going to come here to my regional tree, because how about Derek is in charge of Midwest, which in our single tree means my setup and maintenance is so easy. 1 tree, maybe I can have more than 1 tree. And then if I'm using rangers or wildcards, I do not have to update the tree either. So I'm going to give Derek all the Midwest. So as new locations with the 4 prefix get added, I can definitely do so. And then sometimes your chart of account might not be cleanly numbered. And then I can definitely have trees that have sort of category up above, or a combination of rangers or wildcards, but it's super easy in our trees. And maybe some other sessions we'll talk about how user-friendly these trees are. Another thing I love as a consultant on Prospero, that's user-friendly trees, far superior than all the others I've seen. Continuing, One last thing after security assignments, like what company, location, departments they have, or their roles and permissions, is what is called visibility. Now I have this visibility at both the report level and budget input level. Let me paraphrase at the budget. I might have the best case budget and worst case budget. Everybody's working on the best case budget. Or second example on the report. Let me compare an income statement versus balance sheet. And I'm just going to show you maybe at the report level, we have this button called visibility, where how about, let's see, maybe 15 people on today's phone call. How about all of you get access to this budget, or in this case, a report? I simply turn that on. Or if not, let's say this is the income statement. Yes, everybody can see your maybe budget too, but let's say, nope, let's pretend this is a balance sheet report. I'm going to turn that off, and maybe down below, I might then say, or give access / visibility, maybe to this role. And how about I have a role called accountant users? Or even I can get granular all the way down to the user level, who can or cannot see this report or budget template. But super easy, has one extra layer of granularity. If you have multiple reports or budget versions, you're working on one single time with one another. I just described multiple budget versions you can have. I'll probably save a couple of those remarks in just a moment. But in the meantime, let me turn my attention to the capital area. I'm going to return back to my end user perspective, back in this main tab. Now notice here, these are my future budgeted capital items versus this is not going to be a historical fixed asset recording system. That's why you have your general ledger database and maybe fixed asset systems to do all that historical tracking of assets. But in Prospero, this is great for budgeting new purchases. Okay, these lines are grayed out, meaning I don't want you to directly input it. I'm going to come to the capital tab. I'm going to click on this insert button. I'm going to give it some ID. I'm just going to call it test 101. Description, I'm going to buy Prospero. Now, speaking of this capital type pick list, this is a similar type of phrase when I was talking about the HR, like your different choices for cell phone, yes, no, or states, California, Colorado, etc. You define what these IDs and labels are, and behind the scenes, which I'll take you in just a second, it tells the system really three primary things, these items. One would be the capital balance sheet account. Second of three is the depreciation expense account. And third, the life in months, like 36-month asset, 48 months, etc., that the system then will automatically capture and record depreciation. I'm just going to choose computer, and let's say, hey, after Derek's presentation, I love Prospero's abilities, so how about in July? I'm going to go ahead and budget that, and then even we have an awesome, either you can buy it outright like a car, or maybe I'm going to rent and lease it, because how about it's only going to cost me $200 per month here to get all the great budgeting ability and reporting ability we just saw today, so great. If not, you can see some larger items. Now here is columns like ID and label. Those are not glamorous. I just chose the type like vehicle computer that you define when I'm placing it to service, like the July date. And then finally, I just want to call left to right. I might be budgeting 4 computers at $5,000 each, therefore $20,000 capital outlay. I budgeted in period 1. Or I can come up here and change that. I'm just going to change it. Nope, I'm going to change it now to April 1st. Then once I come up here and save that, if I return back to the main tab, then that's where my new capital gets recorded, including the corresponding depreciation for it. As we see some amounts I was just playing around with for. And looks like someone even maybe removed the February on this screen, but I won't call all of our attention to that. My eyes did. And then additionally, down below is the new depreciation that might spike in a given month. And really for depreciation, I'm going to paraphrase this as both existing depreciation and new depreciation. Existing depreciation are assets you've already bought that you still need to budget for, that existing depreciation, and then simply I import that amount in. And then this might be the new depreciation that gets automatically populated via additions or edits to the capital tab. And if I wanted to import that existing depreciation, I'll just show you one simple file format. This tab here called Import Depreciation. And then here's the possibilities endless. Now these might be to my depreciation accounts. Or how about I'm going to create a statistic called head count. Or I'm going to create a statistic called units that's just in Prospero and not inside the system. But here's how easily I could import data in literally in seconds into our data warehouse. Or if this is something fancy and automated I wanted to load regularly, well, by all means, we read from your general ledger automatically, or we also tap into other databases efficiently if it's some regular automated item we want to load. But there's just one little glimpse at behind the scenes how user-friendly we can import data into the system, including maybe capital items. Maybe the IT person has this file they just want me to import, but most people are entering and interacting within the front-end application I'm just demonstrating. Now, in the last couple of minutes, we have maybe 10 or so minutes remaining. I'll be winding down for a question and answer, but usually what I see in these phone calls are people are just sitting back, absorbing information. But in the meantime, let me conclude with a couple other illustrations on the budgeting side. One would be I can have as many different budget versions that I want, like best case, worst case, or quarter 1, 2, 3. I'm also going to show you a real cool rolling forecast screen, because how about what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up this forecast. I'm the budget administrator. So how about we've just closed out period 5, and then when I open this up, and then when I turn on visibility, that means you can see and edit it, that great, I've defined period 5, now we closed, and now maybe you're going to budget out the remaining months of the year, or maybe I want you, good habit, to budget out the remaining months of the next year, either by quarter or month or by year. And what I just described, let me show you now here visually. From left to right, you're going to see the first few actual columns, like January through May, being gray shade and locked. Now, when I open it up for May, you budget out the remaining months like June through December, and maybe I want you to budget out the remaining years like a 3-year plan, either a single column for each future year. It could be quarters or months as you wish, but that's a good trend I'm seeing companies do, meaning budget more frequently instead of once a year, maybe quarterly or monthly, now that they have this awesome Prospero easy product to do so. Avoid Excel hell. And then maybe just close this, and how about I'm going to role play, I'm next month later, and then this is budget 6. And then I'd really quickly do a file save as. That way maybe I want to keep version 1 intact and not overwrite it. And now basically I'm opening up now version 2 of my budget in case I want to see a before and after, like, all right, what's my difference between my best case or worst case, which could also be another analogy I'm doing as I'm moving between time, like period 5 to 6, but maybe best case, worst case would be another real world example I commonly do. All right, and this renders, there is then now automatically June showing. I did not have to do anything else. We have easy column design saying now show me through the current month. I defined it as, in this case, period 6 June, or whatever your calendar is. And how about finally, before the little questionnaire, I'm going to open up the balance sheet and cash flow. Cash is king. 25 years doing this. I see more and more companies budgeting balance sheet and cash flow, so we can definitely do so. That phrase, there's not been a budget model report I've been not able to produce in the system, so test us out in that trial version if you're a prospective customer or partner. And finally, a couple of things down here at the very bottom. When we referred to trees earlier, like net income, or this could also be all my asset purchases, I simply have, using our roll-up in wildcards, I'm grabbing all location, all departments for an account called net income, which rolls up, let's say, the range of revenue expenses, we'll call it 4,999. And then down below here is some of the new software additions. So here's a line where I'm looking up, here are the segments to the right. The ones are all my assets additions. I just have a column here for beginning balance, but there's how I can take my budgeted beginning balance sheet items and then here to the right, formulate or input the rest of my modeling needed, like this balance sheet cash flow example. All right, as I wind down, I'll say a personal thank you for joining us today. I want to make sure I share my email as one source if you have any follow-up questions to today's session. So derek.krebs@msxgroup.com. So thank you one and all. And let me also quickly look at the question area, see if anything came in. All right, and then one question was back on the HR related, like how about someone works for January through May, then August through December, and then that might be rare, but let's say it's maternity leave. And then how we do so, which I partially described, but let me now do so, is in our budget input screen. I'm going to call the before and after. So here's the before, meaning just 2 columns. We call it annually when they start and end. But let me come up here and close that out. I'm going to come back to my human setup behind the scenes. And I'm just going to turn on one little check mark. That is back in this input definition for our budget. Instead of annually, I turn that off. I'll now just save this. Now, before I save, I did play around some other stuff. Let me close this without messing up maybe someone else doing this tomorrow, which I saw 1 or 2 examples of that earlier today. So, and finally, the grand finale to that only just take me 1 extra click. I'm just closing some of me playing around, not saving that. Back to my original budget. Human Resources tab, I'm going to turn that off and save and reopen this screen. And not a huge grand finale like I described earlier, but still I like to be sure to be thorough and transparent always. And usually it's that easy of a setup like I'm showing you right now. And then I'll take you back to the Human Resources tab, which will now break it out by month instead of just 2 columns of start and end. All right, thank you for that one question that came in. And then here's a visual to it. I could then break it out by month. So they said, hey, maybe they don't work these certain months here, so I just zeroed those out. And I could have even varying hours. Right now it's evenly split, but sometimes it might be a 4-4-5 based on the working days. So other real world examples we can definitely meet for fluctuations of our staffing. So, all right, thank you for that question. Let me just check back in case any others I might have overlooked that came in. All right, I do think that's it. So a big thank you one and all for those that are attending live or maybe later viewing this via recording. Otherwise, have a good rest of your day. See you soon.